What's going on, guys? Just back today for another video. Wanted to go ahead and make something actually related to stocks. Made another video the other day, just talking about the stuff that we're dealing with in our world and all the BS that we're having to necessarily live through and not necessarily know the complete story of what's going on because we have to just believe what they tell us. So, with that being put in mind, let's go ahead and see something that we potentially might be able to benefit from financially with the way that things are shaping up. So one stock that has exploded this past year is Palantir. Now, Palantir is an AI surveillance company that is also being thrown into different sorts of defense and military grade weapons. Currently being used over in Israel, and Peter Thiel, as well as Alex Karp, but more specifically Peter Thiel, has connections with Trump. He's had connections with Elon Musk. Was a co-founder of PayPal, and he's been, in this sort of position of power for quite some time. And this is his company. Now, he's a strange man. He goes ahead and has spoken on the fact of the Antichrist, and has talked about similar sorts of technologies that are relatively pretty similar to the company that he's, that he helped to start. And it just looks like he is well aware of the evils that he is surrounding himself with, and he doesn't care. I don't know if it's just mass hysteria where you just believe that you're not the evil person because you know yourself, but he's just kind of feeding into this dystopian future that lies ahead of us. Now, the stock, this is just the past year. Like, this was a year ago, right here. 10/7, we were looking at a close of $38.89. This is more than, 5x? Right about 5x if we're looking at 190, but just say 4.5, I guess, so 470. They received a little bit of bad news because at least last close on October 3rd, they were said that they were not keeping their information too confidential. They said that anybody that had clearance to any of their technologies was able to see everything and anything that are within those classified documents that they might not want some regular personnel person to see. They went ahead and denied these claims, saying that, people are just going to over-exaggerate, but of course not. Of course we have these things in place. We don't know how true that is, but as we can see, it is clearly still riding. This MAC 50 or MA 50 line hasn't broken down, and the only time that we did see it necessarily really break down towards the MA 200 was back in April 7th of 2025, which once again was due to Trump manipulating the market in some sort of way with Liberation Day. And as we can see from there, we've been on a tear ever since. So, this is a good stock if it were to come back down. Don't necessarily like all that they're doing. But if we can see how this has exploded, now I'm going to look at the monthly chart. Now, look right here. So, the Trump administration came in right here. This was the election. Now, right at the election time, it looks like we bounced off of the resistance set by a couple months in from their IPO. Looks like the IPO was in September of 2020. It hit its max 2021, so 4 months later. And then ever since then, it's kind of consolidated, went down, hit a low price of $5.84. And then at that Trump administration before the election, looks like it reached that same sort of level of, what is that, 30, like around 30-40 range. And then ever since that, it's just been tearing ever since we've gotten more regulations set by Trump to help this sort of surveillance be taken place. Now, something that we can go ahead and try to maximize. So what we want to do is see the trends that we already have set in place and look into the future potentially in the same ticker or a different one that is sort of similar. So right now AI is going nuts, and there was a little bit of slowdown, but it's just tearing. Bitcoin today reached an all-time high, sitting. It dropped back down to 123, but it reached 125 this morning, and yeah, it looks like we are not necessarily stopping until some negative data is put out to us. Now, the government shutdown delayed all of the data that was supposed to necessarily be displayed last week. So last week there was only 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that the government shutdown has been in place. On Friday, we're supposed to have a negative jobs report that potentially could have at least hurt the markets a little. But they didn't have to display it because there's a government shutdown in place. So, I think they're just kind of pushing it off to the side and letting it linger for later. But we might see a crash, or we may see Trump continue to just coddle the stock market and just let it continue to rise. So right here, we're looking at the monthly for Bigbear AI. Bigbear AI is another surveillance company, specifically in the realms of biometrics. Now, if you don't know what biometrics are, they are just what you use on a daily basis. So your iPhone uses it, your Mac uses it, Samsung phones, whatever. If you have a phone that knows your fingerprint or can open just via Face ID scan, that's just biometrics. Now, they're taking it from a consumer standpoint. They're not taking it from a consumer standpoint. They are taking it more so for homeland security. They are within, as of late, multiple different airports, such as O'Hare. They have them in Denver International. They have them in Nashville International, and a couple others. Now they have contracts mostly, not mostly, but entirely with government subsidies. So we are talking about like the Department of Defense. We're talking about the FAA. We're not selling to consumers. We are selling to the government. And this is where I see a lot of potential upside. It's because if we're signing contracts with the government, meaning Bigbear AI, Um, there's if they like the product, there's no losing. You know, like if they really enjoy the product, if it works. Now they have been said to be accurate up to 99% accuracy. So they are high functioning technologies that Big Bear is implementing. Um, that yeah, that need to be taken seriously, because the more and more that we slowly venture into a more controlled state, the more and more that they're going to want to use technologies such as this one. Now in China, you already know that they have like the social credit score, basically, that they use, facial recognition with computers, I mean, with cameras all over the country, and based on your behavior, you're judged by that. Now, as much as we preach that, we don't like this sort of control, we don't like this communistic idea of, having everybody set to a number of their worth, basically. We do like that. Not us as the American people, but the people in charge of the American people, because it's easier to control the American people with some sort of system in place like that. And one thing that they're using this for specifically is border patrol. Now, coming through our borders, coming through customs, they're trying to make it easier for people to not have to wait in such long lines. That's what they're saying. Oh, you don't have to wait in these long lines. You can just get your face scanned, and once you're in the system, like, it's just going to be as easy as that. Like, you shouldn't necessarily be worried about anything because you're not a criminal. Come scan your face, and we can make this process a whole lot easier. Yes, but now you're in the system, right? People don't want to be in the system necessarily, and some people don't care. And the American people, most of us, if you're, looking at stocks on this video, like wanting to learn more, you're not a criminal, right? You shouldn't be scared of having your face or your anything put into the system. I recently got my mortgage loan originating license, and one thing that I was kind of joking around about is that they had to take my fingerprint. And I'm like, dang, like, I better sell some houses. Like, this better actually pay off, because now your boy's in the system. Like, what the heck? Like, if I do anything, they can find my fingerprint on a crime scene. And since it's in the FBI database, boom, they could potentially link it to me. Now, I'm not a criminal. That wasn't necessarily too scary for me, because I know I'm not doing things to that degree that will get me in trouble, that can put me in that sort of situation where I get in trouble for being, like, innocent, you know. So I feel like a lot of other Americans have the same sort of mentality, where I have nothing to be scared about. Like, we go in and willingly go into an x-ray, or that, I know there's probably x-ray technology in it, but the one where, you're fully scanned from front to back and you have to hold your hands up like this, we willingly do that, knowing dang well, like, that could potentially cause cancer. It could screw with your, I'm not sure, like, you're not allowed to go in there if you have a pacemaker. There are not radio waves, but some sort of frequency, some sort of wave being pushed through your body to be able to see what you have. If you potentially have something strapped to you, if you potentially have something inside of you, like, they would be able to see it. Now, that's not necessarily healthy, and we don't care, right? It just makes it easier to go through the process. Could you imagine having to wait hours through TSA because they have to go ahead and pat you down and go with a wand to necessarily see if you potentially have a threat? People don't want to do that. They want to do what's easier, what's faster, and what makes other people, not hate them. If I have to wait for somebody in front of me to have this whole thing just specially designed for them that I have to wait through, like it's going to anger me. That person in front of me doesn't want to anger the people behind them. Some people don't care, and kudos to them. That's awesome. They'll go ahead and take the manual, like one check instead of going through the X-ray. But a lot of people aren't like that, and so I do think, like, even with Apple, like, we willingly just updated our facial structure into their database, and we don't think anything of it. Now, if we're promised that in the airport sense, where it's just like a pre-check and you're just easily can walk onto your next plane, now they're like that's going to be very beneficial to the airflow traffic of everything, at least within the terminals themselves. And another thing that they're mainly doing it for is to catch these illegal immigrants in America. Now, if you're not in the database, you're not American, they're going to know that just based off of your face. They don't have to dive deeper into your passport, your visa, anything else. Your face is your passport and your visa. Pull up your face from the cameras that you're just walking through the regular terminal. Before you even get to the TSA lines, they would be able to have all of this information. Now, I'm thinking that way down the line. Right now, they have just scanners that you walk up to, scan your face, they know it's you, all right, you match your information, you're through. Boom. And with 99% accuracy. Now, they do have a lot of contracts in the pipeline. So they have a lot of deferred payments right now that are being slowly tacked on every quarter. And right now they don't have a ton of airports, but they do have partnerships with multiple. Those being... Sorry. What It's like I was saying, a couple of them that I was saying, but obviously a lot more. And what's significant about them is it seems like they're just testing it out, whether people like them, whether people like whether it works or not with the accuracy. That's obviously going to be a huge factor whether or not this actually works. So Tom Bradley International actually had an uncle that designed the architecture for the building, or was a part of it. Um, Terminal 7, Terminal 4 and 8. But all for international travel. Like, if you see everything's international, everything's international. Now, I'm not sure if they're just necessarily saying international and they're having them just in the domestic terminals. You don't, it's not really telling me. I could probably dive deeper into it. But this is just another way for Trump, which Trump is pushing for Border Patrol and kicking out as many immigrants as we possibly can. And, it's just to secure our borders, but it's also to secure the Republican um, vote for them to win. Now, if you're kicking out immigrants, you're kicking out people who are citizens but are still democratic, yet but they're just brown. You're taking a lot of the population that would vote for the other side. Like, it's a known fact. Like, immigrants vote Democratic, and like the majority votes for Republican. Like, minority versus majority. I'm not saying like the majority of the U.S., but um, one sec. So the deployments are at major international airports and points of entry and ports of entry. For example, installed at 14 international departure gates. So it looks like all of them are just for international departure gates and receiving gates. Arrival. There's no public evidence that they're being used for purely domestic. Where border patrol is not in control. So yeah, you can see that they are very much so being implemented in different terminals, specifically for border control. And right now we are sitting at a lovely price of $7.19. Now I bought in, and I have positions just long term at about $5.50. And I do not think that this is going to necessarily come back down significantly. I think the lowest that it could potentially come back down to is, at this point, potentially maybe around $4, but it looks like it did break through right here. Sorry, I had a Fibonacci sequence right here. So it looks like it did break through, but it came right back below. So we might see a big breakout, especially with this government shutdown being put in place. A lot of people, especially Democrats, don't want our information like that to be gathered. Like, people don't necessarily like that. Republicans like that because it's an easier way to control immigrants. Um, but us American citizens, especially if you have like any sort of fear about some sort of Big Brother, 1984 George Orwell type, we don't like this, right? But the government does. And we have an all-time high sitting at 16.12. And what's kind of interesting about this is it's sort of kind of like Palantir, where Palantir's beginning, right? Palantir IPO just shot up straight to the sky, got up to $44 and stayed well below that for the longest. Well below that for the longest, up until once again Trump got elected, and it was specifically that week of, right there says it 11/8, and the election this last year was on 11/5. So 3 days after, let the weekend hit, and boom, we've been off to the races ever since for Palantir. Now, Big Bear isn't as big as Palantir, but that just leaves us room to run. And one thing that I've been seeing lately, not lately, but something that has been on my mind lately, is that I've seen that they released January 2028 calls for a bunch of different stocks, mostly all of them. if they go out that far. Depends on the stock. But January 2028 would run to the end, not the end, but the year before Donald Trump has to get out of office. So a lot of legislation is supposed to be taking place, and he's going to try to push for as much power of the Republican side to take over both the House, just Congress in general, to pass laws where this becomes a foreseeable future that we can't do anything about. It's for our safety. Think about everything after 9/11. You're not given the chance to not go through TSA. Like, you have to, right? In the UK, the Prime Minister just implemented that everybody is going to need to have a what is it? I know it's a biometric ID, but I don't know if it's facial, what already exists, what doesn't currently have a universal mandatory. They talked about something though. Yeah, they want to make a new digital ID that everybody is supposed to have, so it's easier to go ahead and say whether you're a citizen or not, to kick out anybody that's illegal. Everybody in the world is starting to see this, especially with the displacement of Palestinians, and just a lot of refugees just lately being kind of thrown around the world, basically with nowhere left to go. People are trying to protect their homeland, and I do believe that this right here would be a great play. Now, say potentially we do get up, I think easily, right? We gotta touch that all-time high, if not pass it. But let's just be conservative and just say that we're in 2028 after 3 years, like 2.5 years. We're going to reach this maximum height again at 16.12. If we have options right now at 7, right? Let's just think of this from an investor's standpoint, right? We would have to pay $410 to get this strike price of $7. So a strike price at $7, if we were to go up to 16, right, that's a difference of $9. So that's a profit of $900 minus 410. So you're getting around $500 on each contract that you make, or on each contract that you buy, and that's just if it goes to $16. Now, if it goes to $16 before all the way 2028, say it happens to go to $16 by the end of the year, it's going to be worth a lot more than just 2x, because that's basically what you're doing. If this gets up to $9, then this is basically like 2x, right? 2x in 2 years, depending on who you ask, is pretty solid. You know, like you get a return of the S&P 500 about like 5% a year, or maybe less, like 3% a year, and that's like solid. If you're doubling your capital in 2 years, like that's not too shabby. And this is for something that is, you know, what in my perspective, is foolproof, and something that can easily break past $16. If we are in for some reason, Big Bear is a smaller company, but is strictly compared to Palantir, and just because they have the same business model, the same sort of structure that they want to implement in terms of using AI to for surveillance and kind of to control the population. Now, this isn't necessarily a positive thing to invest in my opinion, right? But we can ride the wave, right? This is millions of investors are going to be piling into this, as they already are. Like, right here, if we check the, what is this, the bid size, so we have a lot of people wanting to buy, right, at 4.7. A lot of people wanting to buy everything. Um, Not as much wanting to sell, except for right here at $2. But there's some activity for 2028, right? So if we just stay patient, guys, I do believe this is a good stock to invest in. Either if you want to just buy stock, if you want to be a little bit riskier and do these options, but if you're buying options all the way in 2028, I do think the risk is significantly minimized to the point where it is just going to be a lovely run up of your money. But yeah, I shall catch you again with other stock information and other things to go ahead and talk about. But I just wanted to reach out, show you a little bit of something that I'm currently invested in, and see if you guys potentially like it as well. All right. Well, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day. Stay safe out there. Be easy. Peace.